DAB digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. The Week with George Galloway on Talk Sport.
Welcome to The Week with me, George Galloway, here every Friday night between 10 and 1 o'clock in the morning, and only on Talk Sport, the Sony Academy radio station of the year. My telephone number is, as always, 08717 223344. That's 08717 223344. First-time callers are prioritised. Women callers are prioritised. Callers who disagree with me are prioritised. And who knows, maybe you'll come into all three categories. But all calls, of course, are welcome, as are texts at 81089, though they cost 50 pence plus normal sending charges. And you can email me free of charge through the website at talksport.co.uk. We're talking about booze and money and embarrassing bodies. We're talking a bit about rugby, whose idea of fun seems to be tossing dwarves, as in throwing dwarves, around hostelries in New Zealand. Or am I being too harsh? Maybe. And we'll be talking about corporal punishment, as a survey shows that nearly half of all parents wish that men could hit their children with sticks. That's right. Almost 50% of parents in the Times Educational Supplement poll want to bring back the cane. As Richard Littlejohn would say, you couldn't make that up. Now, a little light spanking between consenting adults is one thing, but nobody's going to hit my children with a piece of wood, least of all a strange man. Let me assure you of that. And on the anniversary of the collapse of Lehman Brothers, UBS, the Swiss bank based in London, revealed that allegedly a 31-year-old Ghanaian employee had just lost them $2 billion. Capitalism? Crazy? Or what? This is insane that our economy is placed in the hands of these people. Somebody needs to put all their hands behind their backs and put a pair of handcuffs on them, if you ask me. And how much suffering does the Libyan people have to endure? Cameron? Sarkozy? There's a dwarf that should have been thrown. What's next? Berlusconi? George W. Bush? It's all here on The Week with me, George Galloway, and only on Talk Sport.
The Week with George Galloway on Talk Sport.
Now, I've never watched Freaky Eaters or Embarrassing Bodies, and I usually run a mile from the term TV doctor, as seen on TV. But Laurie, my ace producer, and it is the A-team on again tonight, Laurie, Ugo, and the Doc. Laurie assures me that Dr. Pixie McKenna is well worth listening to, especially when nearly a third of the people in the country look online to understand if there's symptoms, and nearly a third, 34%, that's more than a third, do check to see if they need to see a healthcare professional. We're looking at the embarrassing state of the National Health Service, as well as the embarrassing state of too many of our bodies. Do we need to start taking more responsibility for our own healthcare? Should we be more worried about the cuts and the future for British healthcare? We'll be talking to Dr. Pixie. I like saying that. After the 11 o'clock hour, we'll be talking later in this hour to the rebarbative, redoubtable, sometimes remarkable Nigel Farage, the UKIP party leader, member of the European Parliament, who makes a rather fine living out of denouncing the European Parliament and all its works, and meanwhile enjoys it. And we'll be talking to Professor Sir Ian Gilmore, who is of the Royal Liverpool University Hospital. He's the past president of the Royal College of Physicians, and he's a trustee of Alcohol Research UK. Professor Sir Ian is a very formidable and significant figure. And he says that moderate and non-drinking shoppers are subsidising heavier drinkers at the supermarket tills. He says if there was no discounting of alcohol, then it's likely that the weekly shopping basket would be cheaper for people who don't drink heavily. In total, and this is a stunning statistic, there were 1.1 million hospital admissions in England for drink-related illnesses in 2009-2010. And this is the stunning statistic, that the number of people being admitted to hospital for drink-related illnesses has almost risen by 50% in 5 years. 10% virtually per year is the increase in the number of people treated in hospital. 1.1 million admissions, as I said. The cost of that is truly phenomenal. And it's, according to The Guardian, undoubtedly true that heavy drinkers are being subsidised by ordinary shoppers. A gram of cocaine in Yorkshire costs £40. 40 grams of alcohol costs £1. Do the maths and gaze around you and do the calculation about what the loss is to family life, to social life in the country. I'm very clear about it. So, that's what's on tonight, and you can join in on 08717 223344, or you can text me on 81089. I'm interested in the funniest movie, because I'm just looking at the decision by whom now? Somebody's made a decision. A poll for Time Out says that the spoof music documentary, This Is Spinal Tap, is ranked the greatest comedy movie of all time by experts. Yeah, right. Somebody must have been on the cocaine or the white cider when they came up with that conclusion. In my opinion, This Is Spinal Tap. What, better than Airplane? Better than Annie Hall? Huh, I don't think so. What do you think? You can tell me by text on 81089 for 50p plus normal sending charges, or by email free of charge through the website at talksport.co.uk. We want your views on these or any other matters that are grabbing you. This is George Galloway. This is The Week. This is TalkSport.
It's another tequila sunrise, staring slowly across the sky.
I think it's punishing the majority of us who are sensible drinkers just for a minority.
I think minimum price on supermarket alcohol might be one thing, but prices in pubs are too much anyway. And the problem is, people are sitting at home and drinking instead of coming to pubs.
A minimum price is slightly different in the sense that it is a relative alcohol pricing policy. In other words, it increases the price of alcohol according to the alcohol beverage's strength. So the stronger the alcohol, the more cost it will have.
The minimum unit price will not affect the price of a pint of beer in a pub. It will not affect the price of a glass of wine in a restaurant. It will almost exclusively target the very cheap, heavily discounted alcohol in off-licenses and supermarkets.
It's another tequila sunrise.
Well, look, I could declare a lack of interest on the basis that I'm a teetotaler, and if I had my way, we wouldn't have any alcohol in the country at all, nor any drugs. But I know that's not going to happen, and I'm not a disinterested bystander, because I have to live in the country where in the last 5 years 50% increase in the number of people being taken to hospital in England and Wales with alcohol-related illnesses. 50% in 5 years. We have an epidemic of binge drinking, drunkenness, and alcoholism. It's an epidemic. Do you understand me? Now, we have criminalized tobacco. I'm no longer a smoker either, but we criminalized it to the extent that you couldn't smoke in a 3-sided bus shelter without being fined. Yet we reward people for being the purveyors of alcohol with seats in the House of Lords and respectability. Just this day, before I knew that we were going to be doing this subject, I wrote off a complaint to the Advertising Standards Authority, as I often have, about the repeated breaches of the prohibition on making drinking look glamorous in television advertising of alcohol. An ad that I saw last night, I'm not at liberty to say which, just made a mockery of that idea. Alcohol is constantly legitimized and even glamorized in our society, despite the fact that it's destroying families, it's destroying social life in the country, it's costing a fortune in an NHS which can't afford it. 50% in 5 years is the increase in the number of people taken to hospital with alcohol-related illnesses. Now, Professor Sir Ian Gilmore probably didn't agree with much of that rant, but what he does, I think, agree with, is that we must tackle this at the point of sale. We must tackle this at the cost. It's £40 for a gram of cocaine, and 40 grams of alcohol is £1. I was in Sainsbury's today. There are whole aisles of cheap alcohol, loss leaders, to bring people into the stores. That means that people like me, who would never buy alcohol, are subsidizing those who are part of this epidemic. That's my point of view. What's yours? 08717 223344. We're very privileged, actually, to get Professor Sir Ian Gilmore, MD of the Royal Liverpool University Hospital, to kick this debate off. Professor, welcome very much to the show.
Good evening, George.
Now, what's your stand on minimum pricing units of alcohol?
Well, there's no doubt from the evidence over the last 30 years that price is probably the single biggest driver of how much a community drinks. Now, there is not a lot of experience worldwide of a minimum unit price, but it has a lot of attractions over just banging up the tax. The problem is if you just put the tax up, A, you have to make a very big increase in tax to make a difference, and that's usually politically unacceptable. But B, it hits the price of every drink in an unselective way, whether it's as I said in that clip, whether a pint of beer in a pub would go up, a glass of wine in a restaurant would go up. And the great attraction of the minimum unit price is that it doesn't affect any drink that is reasonably priced, but it does affect the deep discounting. The problem is that people don't understand it, and I'm afraid that probably applies to our Prime Minister, because he was tackled in the House of Commons this week at Prime Minister's Question Time by the MP, Dr. Sarah Wollaston, and he said that he agreed with her that deep discounting needed to be tackled, but he disagreed with the way of doing it. And she specifically was proposing a minimum unit price, and I don't think David Cameron himself really understood the way that does go for the very cheapest drink in the supermarkets, but doesn't affect a half-decent bottle of wine.
Well, of course, it's more than half-decent, the wine he'll be drinking, I have no doubt. And people like him, millionaires, don't really understand the concept of price sensitivity. It wouldn't matter to him what the price of his bottle of Chateau Neuf de Pape was. He would pay it without even blinking. In fact, probably doesn't even know what it would cost. But when I was in the supermarket today, and it just so happened, because my blood was up over this advert actually, not knowing we were doing this subject tonight, looked at some of the prices that is being charged in supermarkets for alcohol. It's like life on Mars. It's like going back to the 70s or the 80s, the prices.
Yes. Well, on the topic of advertising, George, did you know that in a cinema, in a film that's rated 12, that they can show and do show adverts for alcohol before the films?
Well, I didn't know that, but what I certainly know, and I've been a constant complainer, not that you get very far, but you have to complain, there is a prohibition on making alcohol look glamorous.
Yes.
Have you seen an alcohol advert that doesn't try to make it look glamorous?
Absolutely.
What's the point of advertising it?
Absolutely.
They're trying to show it to be fun, to be glamorous, when in fact it wrecks people's lives, wrecks family life, wrecks social life, costs the NHS a fortune.
It's also not supposed to suggest a link to sporting prowess.
Yeah.
But Heineken is the official beer of the 2012 Olympics.
I wonder what they were drinking when they were throwing dwarfs around in the pubs in New Zealand. Professor, what can we do? You and I, maybe Cassandra in the wilderness here, we don't seem to be making much progress.
Well, I'm not as pessimistic as that. If you go back 5 years, not a single political party accepted that price was an important factor. Now all the parties do. It's just the means by which you bring about that change. Look at Scotland. Alex Salmond has made a commitment to a minimum unit price, and he's now got a majority government that can bring that about. Northern Ireland is moving that way. It may well end up being like the ban on smoking in public places, where England was dragged kicking and screaming by the example of the devolved nations. So I'm not pessimistic. I think there is a mood, but on the other hand, the research that was published together with the launch of alcohol research this week did show that the general public are not in favour of a minimum unit price, and I think that's partly because turkeys don't tend to vote for Christmas, but it's also partly because they don't understand that it really won't affect the average moderate drinker.
Well, let's hope you're right and that there are reasons for optimism. Are they going to do that in Scotland, or is that just another pre-election promise to be broken?
Alex Salmond and the Scottish Government are really committed to it. There is a big argument as to whether it is legal. The drinks industry will tell you that it will fall foul of European anti-competition law, but the Scottish Government have taken legal advice and they are satisfied that it will be legal. If it is made law in Scotland, it will be challenged in the European courts. The drinks industry are I'm sure, waiting to do that. I think the Scottish Government will try to push this through.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Professor Sir Ian Gilmore, MD, Royal Liverpool University Hospital, kicking off one of the debates tonight, which of course is the question of alcohol and pricing in particular. Let's cross, though, to the legendary Jack Bannister, who's watching the cricket for Talk Sport. Jack, wonderful to talk to you again.
And to you, George, and what a debut, I can tell you this now, from a Yorkshireman, a bit south of Scotland, but Johnny Bairstow, the son of the late David Bairstow, also a Yorkshire wicketkeeper, has come in and he's made his debut when England was struggling to get 241 from 34 overs, thanks to a double reduction because of rain interruptions. He's come in, and on debut, without having time to almost take guard, he scored 41 off 21 balls, and he's hit 3 sixes, a 4, and then when the game was virtually won, he was playing the ball short and running twos. He runs like an absolute hare, and with Bapara at the other end scoring 37 off 22 balls, England at one stage they needed 73 off 8 overs. They've won, if you please, with 2 overs to spare. And the crowd capacity at Cardiff have seen a great game, because England winning the toss, it was a big toss to win, the 9th successive toss that they've won against India. Nothing's gone right for them on this tour. To bowl last under difficult conditions with a wet ball and a slippery surface was always going to be a handicap. But nevertheless, that target initially of 305 and then 241 for 4 off 34 overs, it looked out of reach. But Bairstow, as good a debut as you could ever see, and he's bound to tour this winter. A great game. England win 3-0. They resume hostilities with India in India under their conditions in about 5 weeks' time, and with 8 people who've missed this tour because of injury back, it'll be much difficult. But nevertheless, what a debut. Remember the name, Johnny Bairstow.
Well, we won't forget it. The legend says remember that name, and therefore we must. Now, this is George Galloway, this is The Week, this is Talk Sport, but it's time for the news. Well, I must say, the teachers I know, I just cannot imagine them assaulting a child with a stick. I can't imagine that any teacher would want to or be prepared to do that. This is not the 1950s or the 1850s. The idea that inflicting violence on a child is going to make the child better seems to me so self-evidently absurd. It is astounding that nearly half of all parents of secondary school children say corporal punishment such as the cane or the slipper, now you're getting really kinky, should be reintroduced. 49% of more than 2,000 parents surveyed for the Times educational supplement were in favour. Where was this survey carried out? In Wormwood Scrubs or what? This idea that a strange man is going to hit your children is just so ridiculous. It astonishes me that any sane human being believes that it could happen or that it would be helpful if it did. If you inflict violence on a child, you're making the child more violent. This is ABC, is it not? At least to me. 08717 223344. I have never hit any of my children. By the grace of God, I never will hit any of my children. And I never had any problems with the discipline of my children. But you can say what you think. 08717 223344. That's the number to call me. Here's some emails and texts. People are drinking to forget, George. We are living in hard times. Country's going to hell in a handcart, says Billy T. in Widnes. But Billy, of course, drinking doesn't make you forget because you wake up after the drinking. And the problems are worse than they were before you did the drinking because you've blown money that your children needed for shoes or for a coat. Those in favour of corporal punishment should put themselves forward for a public thrashing to prove there's no harm in it. I'd love it if you'd wish me a happy birthday for today, George, says Kevin in Plymouth. Many happy returns, Kevin, and thanks for your support over the years. Peter Silver says children without training, discipline, strict boundaries with severe consequences are likely to become unruly savages. In the 25 years since thrashings were banned, violence in society, attacks against teachers have rocketed. Give ADHD kids 6 of the best every day as a start. That's right. Give ill children 6 of the best every day as a start, says Peter Silva. You see, this is the kind of sadistic sadism. That's what that is. There's something wrong with you, Peter Silva. You're probably bent over the sofa right now, taking a whacking, if I'm any judge. Are you, Peter, in your silver boxer shorts? Bent over the sofa, taking a whacking? Like a whacking, do you, Peter? Or do you like giving a whacking? Dan in Luton says, George, I don't know why people drink. It makes you feel stupid, and even 100 times worse the morning after. So I'm glad I'm a teetotaler now. Good for you, Dan. And Paul says, George, Just watched a program featuring Brian Gerish. He mentioned you and an organization called Common Purpose. I believe Mr. Gerish has asked you for help in exposing the work of Common Purpose, but he says you have been reluctant to do so. Seems strange when you come across as someone who appears to be on the side of the people and not the establishment. Any thoughts? Asks Paul. You've rumbled me, Paul. You've rumbled me. I'm an agent of something called Common Purpose. Actually, that's only my part-time job. My full-time job is gatekeeper to protect George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. In fact, on my New York radio show this week, it became clear that the three principal gatekeepers in the world protecting George Bush and Dick Cheney are Michael Moore, Noam Chomsky, and me, George Galloway. That's the consensus out there in the... I can hear the flap of white coats. I'm not joking. We are the three gatekeepers. You may have thought that we were red, raving, radical lunatics, but actually we are gatekeepers guarding the lair of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, and we now learn something called Common Purpose. Here's Colin in Dundee on alcohol. Go ahead, Colin.
Hi, George. I'm a nightclub manager, and my main problem with the supermarkets is that they're not only driving down the price of alcohol to people who want to consume drink at home.
Yes.
They're also forcing clubs and bars to drive down the price of alcohol.
Yeah, or go out of business. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't compete just with the nightclub next door to me. I compete with the supermarket. And when you can buy 3 cases of
Although
lager...
you can't get much of a dance in your own living room. I mean, it's better to go to the club, surely.
Absolutely. Much better to go out.
Which is your club? Which is your club, Colin?
Fat Sam's.
I've been there.
I know you have.
I've danced in Fat Sam's.
I've been working there for 21 years now, George.
My goodness, that's still going, yeah?
Well, we're now the biggest nightclub in Scotland.
My goodness, extraordinary.
But my biggest competition is supermarkets that sell 3 cases of lager for 20 quid. The duty on that is about £17.26. So the remaining £2.74, they have to make the liquid, bottle the liquid, package the liquid, distribute the liquid, and pay the VAT on the £2.74.
Amazing. These are stunning statistics. It's 40 grams for a pound alcohol in the supermarkets. 40 grams for a pound, and it's £40 for 1 gram of cocaine. Yeah. Well,
I mean, the thing is, I'm well aware of the fact that I sell drugs legally. You know, if alcohol was invented tomorrow, it would be banned tomorrow.
Yes, that would be banned if I had my way, Colin. And I pray for the day when Fat Sam's is bursting at the seams with revellers drinking juice. That's my wish. But the best of luck. Anyway, here's Amanda in Rochdale, who says remarkably, caning never done me any harm. Amanda, I hope this is going to be clean, Amanda.
It is going to be clean, yes. Me and my husband have 6 daughters. I wasn't brought up in the Dark Ages. I was brought up in the 70s. And the capital punishment was in school then.
Well, capital punishment in school would be a very serious matter, because that would require the erection of gallows, or maybe guillotines, or maybe we would shoot them in firing squads. You mean corporal punishment, Amanda?
Yeah, corporal punishment. Yeah. Sorry, I apologise.
Yeah.
We had caning, we had the pump, we had the slipper, we had the ruler across our hands.
Now, look, we're not talking about your private life at home, Amanda. You're not serious. In the 70s, people got the cane, the slipper, the pump, whatever that is. I mean, where was this? In Rhodesia?
No, that was in Rochdale, where I was brought up.
What, girls were hit by men with slippers?
No, we were hit by the female teachers.
So the female teacher slippered the girls?
Yes.
It's beginning to sound sordid.
Well, was it sordid? Was it sordid or was it the right thing to do at the time? It didn't do me any harm whatsoever. And if I have 6 daughters, and if it was brought back, unfortunately, I'm one of them 49% that think it should be brought back into school.
So you'd have no problem about your 6 daughters...
No problem whatsoever.
...being physically hit with a piece of wood or a slipper. This slipper is tantalizing me. The idea is just simply fantastic, Amanda. You can't be serious. A man you don't know. A man or a woman that you don't know.
Why would it be a man or a woman that we don't know? That man has taught us. We entrust our children to them people.
But not to lather not to leather their hind quarters, for God's sake.
A man or a woman that's appeared suddenly that morning. It is a person.
Well, it could be. It could be a supply. It could be a supply teacher. Could be the headmaster that you scarcely know.
It could be a supply teacher, but they have rigorous training, and believe me, I think the fear alone of what they actually would get in the school would be one of the deterrents today.
Well, that's just nonsense, Amanda. I used to get the belt. I used to get the belt almost every day.
And what
it was no kind. It was no. It was no deterrent to me whatsoever.
In your comment, you said violence. It brought up your schools makes the child violent.
And it made me violent. No, it made me violent. No, it made me violent. I'm just writing about it in a book at the moment. It made, in the 1970s, in the late 1960s, I was violent. And the fact that there was violence all around me, there was violence in Vietnam, there was violence in the north of Ireland, the teachers were offering you violence, the gangs were offering violence, it was a very violent place. Amanda, it's better now, believe me.
Is it?
Yes.
Better now?
It's better now that people are not able to physically strike children.
Teenagers better now than what they were when we were younger.
Yes. Well, I mean, you may have led a sheltered life when you were a teenager. I can assure you, I certainly did not.
No.
Well, we know that, Amanda. You and that slipper. Thanks very much for your call. Tantalizing. Or what? 08717 223344. Head of the World Bank, Robert Zoellick. Trouble has flared in Rome as Italy's parliament voted on the country's austerity package. The bill, which aims to reduce the deficit by more than 54 billion euros, or 47 billion pounds, over the next 3 years, was narrowly approved by 314 votes to 300. The head of the World Bank, Robert Zoellick, has urged action to avoid dragging down the global economy.
The global economy has entered a new danger zone, with little running room as European countries resist difficult truths about the common responsibilities of a common currency.
Well, there you go. One man who is no doubt as happy as the proverbial pig at the travails of the European Union as the man who damns it and virtually all its works, except the wages section. Nigel Farage, a very welcome guest, and the leader, of course, of UKIP, and a redoubtable campaigner. Nigel, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Good evening, George. Nice to talk to you.
Now,
and,
am I right that you're delighted?
Well, look, this was the issue that got me into politics. You know, I was working in the City of London as a broker, and in 1990, the British government signed us up for the exchange rate mechanism, pegging sterling against the Deutschmark. I uttered a whole stream of obscenities when I first heard this had happened, predicted it wouldn't work, and it got me involved in politics. Am I pleased that it's on the edge of destruction? In one way, yes, but in another way, no, because actually there's going to be a very big human price to this too.
Well, and not just for foreign humans, but also for us, because 50% or more of our trade is with the European Union, and a very concerned. I was just looking at the Irish figures the other day after I saw Question Time. The amount of our goods and services that are purchased in the Eurozone, including in the Republic of Ireland, just a few hundred yards from a part of our territory at least, it's going to be bad news for Britain as well as Johnny Foreigner.
Well, of course it is. And I mean, you know, if Europe does badly, if America does badly, all these things affect Britain, and it'll affect our exports of goods and services. Of that, there's no doubt. However, when you look at what's happening in Greece today, where Greece, a country with huge problems, I mean, their deficit is even worse than ours, and that's without Gordon Brown being there. They've got this massive...
Oh, that's a bit harsh, Nigel. Would have been in the Euro if it hadn't been for Gordon Brown.
Well, I tell you what, it's the one good thing he did, because had we been in the Euro, we would now be like Greece, of course, having had the wrong interest rates and everything else. But here you've got Greece, the country that invented democracy, now being governed by 3 foreign officials who once every couple of weeks land in a plane at Athens airport and go and tell the Greek government what their tax policy must be, what their spending policy must be, and the total humiliation that the Greeks are now being put through is why there are hundreds of thousands of people out on the streets every day. And if Greece is kept imprisoned in the Euro by the big bankers and by the European bureaucrats and the World Bank and everybody else, then frankly, George, it will end in a revolution. So I think it is better to take the pain, for Greece to default, to go back to the drachma. Yes, of course, there'll be collateral damage for Greece and everybody else, but better to do that. Get your independence back, get your democracy back, and get back your pride and self-respect. So it's going to be very painful, but it needs to happen.
One thing that's not widely known is that when they talk about these bailouts and so on, one might be forgiven for imagining that the Greek people were being bailed out, that a lump of money was being given to help them. In fact, when we give them these bailouts, those bailouts go directly to the banks.
That's absolutely right. I mean, in fact, what is happening is we give money to Greece and they give it back to our banks, who should never have lent them the money in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the reality is that the Greeks are so indebted they can barely service the interest on the debts, all right? And what we're doing is we're forcing them to take on yet more debt. I mean, the whole thing is completely and utterly barking mad. It cannot last. Greece will default. Portugal will default. I suspect in time Ireland, too, will probably default. And we're going to finish up with a Eurozone, which will be effectively a greater Deutschmark area. That, I think, is what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, that may very well be what happens. What should happen is another matter, of course. You're a supporter of free market capitalism. You're a supporter of you were yourself in this city.
Yeah.
Here, this is a system that allows a 31-year-old man, not allows, but makes it possible for a 31-year-old man, allegedly, to cost a bank $2 billion because of gambling.
Well, look, I mean, things go wrong in the private sector. Let's not, kid ourselves that awful things don't go wrong in the public sector. Just look at the billions of pounds we've wasted on a new computer system for the National Health Service. So
that's true, Nigel, but no 31-year-old man in the public sector could spend $2 billion. That's not possible.
No, but a 51-year-old man could, or woman could, and in the case of the NHS, they have. So I mean, stupidities are not confined to the private sector. I would agree that there is still a lot wrong with the investment banking system. It is still open to abuse. What it needs is good regulation, proper regulation, and what actually we've had is we've created the Financial Services Authority. There are 3,000 staff down in Canary Wharf taking up a building, and frankly, they've been as good as useless. I believe in free markets, but for free markets to work properly, they need good rules. And really, ever since 2007-8, when this whole credit crunch first hit, politicians blame the bankers, but actually, it's the politicians and regulators that have not put in place proper rules.
Nigel, I'm glad you're back in the saddle. That last lad you had was not much cop. I mean, they must be glad to have you back at the UKIP.
Well, I don't know. I hope so. I'm back doing it. It's 7 days a week. It's all the hours God sends. But you know what? I'm enjoying it. And I absolutely believe that we're going to get our democracy back in this country. And, George, whether we're on the left or the right is irrelevant. We should be governing our own country, not having little people like Herman Van Rompuy making our rules.
Thanks very much, Nigel Farage. Keep on taking the wages and the X's, though. 08717 223344, leader of UKIP. Great campaigner. Great to have him back. This is George Galloway. This is The Week. This is TalkSport.
On DAB digital radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport.
Yes, you're listening to The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport, and I'm here every Friday night between 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the morning. My phone number, as always, is 08717 22 3344, or you can text me for 50 pence plus normal sending charges on 81089, or write to me free of charge through the website at talksport.co.uk. We're talking about drink, cheap drink in particular. We're talking about an economy in which a 31-year-old man can gamble and lose. £1.3 billion for a bank. How long before we'll be bailing it out is what I ask. And on a day when 4 men perish, tunnelling away in the bowels of the earth, in amongst the flooding and the rock falls, to scrape a living in the benighted post-industrial desert that is South Wales and so many of our other post-industrial areas. What kind of madness is this? And we'll be talking about embarrassing bodies, present company accepted, with Dr. Pixie, whom I'm told is quite a star performer. She's coming up during this hour. It's The Week with me, George Galloway, on TalkSport.
The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport.
And rather depressingly, we're talking about and to people who are lining up to say they'd be perfectly happy to let a stranger inflict violence upon their children, their own children. And 2 of them have been women. Here's Sheila in Watford. Sheila.
Hello, George.
What's wrong with your girl?
No, listen, I think you completely got it wrong. You know, I grew up in the 80s, and obviously you grew up in a different era to what I was brought up in. And where the boys were really, really naughty, it wasn't somebody came along and spanked them and really, really abused them. You went to the head of the year, you put your hand out, and you got a slipper on your hand. Now, I don't think there's anything sadistic about that.
We're talking about the cane on your bum, Sheila.
No, but I'm not talking about that.
But that's what this...
about when I grew up in the 80s.
Well, okay, but I'm talking about this poll, which says that 49% of parents of secondary school children are perfectly content to have...
But they're pretty mad, aren't they?
To have a stranger hit their children on the bum with a piece of wood.
Yes, but I'm not like that, and neither are you. No. You know, I only talk back on my experiences as growing up in the 80s. You weren't... I mean, realistically, people that were hit in the bottom with a cane, how many years ago was that? Were you?
No, I didn't go to that kind of a school. But,
neither did I.
But I'll tell you what, a lot of people who did grow up in that kind of a school...
But they must be so old. I mean, I don't... Well, no, I can only talk about my experiences, but...
No, well, let me finish, though. I was going to make this point.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at public school boys.
Okay.
Take a look at them and ask yourself, of a certain age, and ask yourself if this preoccupation with pants down, bend over, take the stick,
yeah, but then
was good,
you know what I mean?
was good for them or not. Well,
George,
I mean, it's a kind of, it's sickness, it's perversion.
Exactly. And then, you know, we're not talking the programme, we're talking about what we should be now. We're talking a completely different thing. What
Sheila.
I'm talking about is what you were saying about is, you know, to be punished for your bad behaviour. Yes, I am full on, put your hand out and get a slap on it. That's the way I think, George.
And you think that's going to make children behave better?
Listen, George, you see the kids around nowadays, they are...
Have you got children?
Totally and utterly out of hand. Now,
have you got children?
Yes, I've got 3. I've got a teenager. I've got a teenager now at the age of 18. Good. Well, she's called Holly.
Oh, my goodness, you must have been a child bride. But listen...
I'm older than you think, George. I'm older.
Listen to me, listen.
Yes.
You've got 3 children.
Yes, I've got little ones, I've the big ones, and I have to
Are they
say
out
to you
of
that,
hand?
George,
Are they out of
let me speak.
hand?
My little ones, I don't believe in smacking children, but growing up, I got a smack on my back of my legs, my mother and father, when I misbehaved.
But did you do that to your children?
No, of course I don't.
Well, neither do I.
No,
My children are not out of control, are yours?
Yeah, but you're older than me, aren't you?
But so you keep telling me. So you keep reminding me.
Sorry.
But listen,
Yeah.
Sheila.
Yeah.
You're not beating your children. I'm not beating my children.
No, but
my
I am
children.
quite...
Let me finish. My
No,
children are not
but
out
George,
of control.
I am quite happy though to be in school. I know people say about parents take control, but I also think as well in schools. I remember being in school as having teachers that were very, very strong. Quite, I wouldn't say harsh, but had control of a class, and you respected those teachers. And then, I remember teachers, there wasn't that many, a couple that were quite, I would say, weak. And it also became a pack mentality. They've got a weak teacher, you'd get a lot of them that would misbehave.
Well, okay, look, I know I'm older than you, Sheila, but thanks for the call. Here's Graham in Merseyside. Go ahead, Graham.
Good evening, George.
Hi.
It's been a bit of a wait. I'd just like to say before I make my point, I really respect you for your outspoken viewpoints.
Thanks,
willingness to stick your head up, mate.
Thanks, Paul.
I was a fan of yours a long time before it became trendy to be so.
Thanks, Graham. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm 49 years of age. I've got 3 sons, aged 20, 17 and 15. I was brought up in the Catholic grammar school system in Liverpool.
Mm-hmm.
Past 11 plus. We used to be sat in class 8, 9, 10, 11 years of age. Boys that were struggling, scruffy boys, maybe didn't get too much love or too much affection at home. Tried to get it in the classroom.
Yeah.
Pulled out by the sideburns, smacked round the head, waited outside the head's room, told to hold out each hand, and they used to move the hand, and they were smacked hard with the cane. They came back into the classroom crying, shameful.
How could anybody want to bring that back, Graham?
This is the point, George. This is the point I want to make, and I suffered from it an awful lot myself within the classroom. Within that system, I'm not attacking the Catholic grammar school system, but they came out in their brown robes and their saintly faces and administered severe beatings to us on a regular basis. And I'd really hate to think that anyone would ever do that to my children. Now, I don't want to pass judgment on them or how they've done things, but I've seen it from both sides as a parent and as a pupil brought up in that system. And the fear and intimidation and the terror that it sort of rode into you. You went out into the classroom, into the playground at playtime, and you started to hit your mates.
Yeah.
And I tried to say to my sons, you don't hit people, you don't use violence. And they said, well, why is our Prime Minister, we're getting away from the subject now, bombing people and invading other countries and killing people?
It's not really off the subject, Graham. I'm cutting you back because I've got so many people on the line. It's not really, I mean, if violence is everywhere, violence will be everywhere. You'll not be able to cluck and say violence is bad when teachers are violent and governments are violent and there's war and mayhem everywhere. Great call, Graham. Thanks for that. Here's Robert in Belfast, where I shall be on Sunday morning in the Rock Bar on the Falls. Robert, welcome to the show.
George, it's nice to speak to the king of the airwaves again.
Thanks, my friend.
On the island of Ireland, George, they've done a survey, 70% of alcohol consumed is in the household, etc. 30% of alcohol is only consumed on licensed premises. Now, truthfully, when you or I are drinking at home, there is no such thing as last orders. And Ireland has the highest rate, like Scotland, for cardiac arrest and stroke and diabetes. And you have kidney failure, liver problems, etc. Now, truthfully, I believe that the government have to get their act together. To be honest with you, they should bring the price of alcohol and off sales and supermarkets to the point where the same price as licensed premises. Where I'm coming from here, George, is when you and I go to a licensed premises, there's somebody in them licensing premises will tell you last orders. When you're drinking at home, there is no such a thing as last orders.
Very powerful point, Robert, but don't include me. You'll never find me in an off-license or drinking at all. But I took your point, which I thought was a powerful one. This drinking at home is worse than drinking in bars. Of course, a lot of these bars and clubs and things are going out of business. But drinking at home is even sadder, even more antisocial, sociopathic than drinking communally in bars. And, as you say, nobody calls time. Nobody says last orders. And people are drinking and drinking and drinking themselves into insensibility and into the medical wards. Because, as I gave the statistic earlier, in the last 5 years, virtually 50% is the increase in the number of people being actually taken into hospital with alcohol-related illness. Now, I'll be speaking with a glass of mineral water in the Three Flowers in Derry tomorrow night at 7:30. That's the Three Flowers in Derry at 7:30 tomorrow night. And on Sunday morning at 11 a.m., I'll be speaking in the Rock on the Falls Road and signing copies of my new book. If you're in the region, in the area, and you'd like to meet me, you'd like to get the book and get it signed, please do show up. 08717 223344. Prime Minister David Cameron and French President Nicolas Sarkozy have received a hero's welcome as they addressed a jubilant crowd in Benghazi. The city is the birthplace of the Libyan revolution. The two leaders flew in to demonstrate their support for the fledgling new government, which has replaced Colonel Gaddafi. Mr. Cameron addressed the crowds in Benghazi's Freedom Square.
We know this was your revolution from your bravery, from people in Benghazi, people in Tripoli, people in Zlitan, people in Brega, people in Misrata. You showed the world you would get rid of a dictator and you would choose freedom.
Well, what further suffering must the Libyan people endure? Berlusconi, George W. Bush, who's coming next? And as the aforementioned Richard Littlejohn said today in the Daily Mail, isn't it a bit premature? Isn't it a bit like celebrating running round Wembley with the trophy when there's still 20 minutes to go in the game? At least that's my point of view. Now, we've got so many people on the line and so many texts and emails, but we're really lucky. We've got TV doctor, Dr. Pixie McKenna, from Freaky Eaters and Embarrassing Bodies, neither of which I've had the pleasure to watch, but my producer vouches safe for both them and Dr. Pixie, so we're really pleased to welcome her onto the show. Dr. Pixie, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
You're very welcome. I'm a bit disappointed you've never seen Embarrassing Bodies.
It's just the title puts me off. I mean, and I've just been listening to Laurie, who's telling me about cameras entering people's anuses and so on prime-time TV. It sounds awful to me.
Oh, no, it's good. It's very educational. You should watch it. Monday night, 9 o'clock. Tune in. You won't be disappointed.
Really?
You'll definitely learn something.
Now, of course, embarrassing bodies are one thing, obese bodies are another, and we're in a situation of near-epidemic proportions in the United States and here on that. We have health reforms underway that the Tories say will leave the health service safe in their hands. Not many people, it has to be said, are queuing up to believe that. How would you summarise the state of Britain's health today and the health service itself?
Whoa, that's a very big question to
Yeah,
ask.
but although you're called Pixie, you're an important figure.
Well, I mean, I have just been today talking quite a lot about some research which Simply Health carried out on 5,000 people and was asking them, what they were thinking about what was going to go on with the health service in the next 5 years. And over half of them were genuinely concerned that the waiting lists would be longer, and a staggering 45% of them were worried that they would be denied treatment. So I think there is concern out there. But what I would also say is that I think we need to move away from this bashing of the NHS, and we need to realise that actually, rather than ourselves try and give out about the NHS and try and repair it, I think we could do a lot by becoming better patients and better users of the NHS, certainly. And I think many
What could we do? What could we do to be better patients? Do you mean like turning up for appointments and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's an extraordinary amount of money wasted on people basically not turning up for appointments, and that's from as far as the GP to, the practice nurses' appointments, to consultants' appointments, to chiropody appointments. I mean, you name it, people don't turn up. Complete your courses of antibiotics if you get a prescription for antibiotics. Don't waste things. There are lots of things that we can do, and we can also access some very reliable health information online. And I think more and more, another thing that's come out of this very large survey was that many people are turning to the internet to aid their diagnoses. And in this survey, 28% actually said they went online to understand their symptoms, and as many as one.
Is that a good thing, Pixie?
I do think it's a good thing. I think you've got to choose your site that you go to, but we've got to remember that the NHS is not just your GP sitting in the surgery with your 7.5-minute consultation. The NHS is also NHS Direct, which is a fantastic resource online. Very, very, we use it as doctors, and I think patients should use it. You can go online 24/7, check your symptoms, and, you can be taken through a series of questions which will, at the end, hopefully make you make that decision whether you need to see a doctor or actually, whether you just need to go and see your pharmacist. And it would save you the hassle and the stress and the time of going to see the doctor. It would save the doctor having to see you, and ultimately it would save the NHS money.
We're in a paradox, aren't we? We're living longer, which must have something to do with medical advance, and has something to do with relative prosperity and so on. We're now living to, roughly 80, as opposed to roughly 70, say, 50 years ago, maybe even a little older than 80. So that's the good news. The bad news is, some of the stats I gave earlier this evening, there's a 50% increase in the number of people being admitted to hospital with alcohol-related incidents. We've got this obesity crisis with all the health problems that brings, diabetes. When I was a kid, I never knew or met anybody with diabetes.
Yeah.
I never knew or met anybody with allergies.
Yeah.
Now on EasyJet the other day, they said you can't buy a packet of peanuts because there's 3 kids on the plane that have got an allergy and they might become sick because you're eating peanuts. There are all sorts of new things happening, that's what I'm saying.
There are all sorts of new things, but remember there are lots of diseases which, we have completely got rid of, things like polio. We don't see TB very often anymore.
Yeah, although TB's coming back, Pixie.
It is coming back, certainly in London. But I think the other thing to remember is that we've changed greatly in the last 50 years and since the inception of the NHS, which is now 63 years old, I think. And I think we are very cognizant of our rights to treatment, etc. But we're not as aware, or we're not as concerned about our own responsibilities to ourselves and to our our families and looking after ourselves. If you are overweight, then you need to realise that is going to have a huge impact on your health and your general well-being, and you need to take that on board.
Listen, it's been great talking to you, Pixie. I need a personal consultation. Make an appointment, please. Dr. Pixie McKenna. Well, have I got time to squeeze in Dermot in Wood Green? He always talks sense. Go ahead, Dermot.
Hello, George.
Hi.
The drink business, that costs the taxpayers zillions of pounds every year. People forget that.
Yeah.
But anyway, concerning capital punishment, corporal punishment. You're saying that I talk sense.
Amanda was advocating capital punishment in schools earlier this evening.
No, but this 49% of people who in the survey, I think what they really meant was, well, those naughty children now, not ours.
Yeah, of course, it's never theirs. When you ask them, are your kids out of control? They never are. It's other people's kids that are always out of control.
And on top of that, George, I have very vivid memories. This is people out there who advocate kind of the return of capital punishment, corporal punishment. Let them go to a garden centre and find themselves a bamboo cane that's used to support plants. That cane was used on us at primary school.
Yeah.
I have very vivid memories at the age of about 9 from a child who turned up late for something like the 3rd time in a row. And this grown woman, she proceeded to whack the guy, the poor fella, and she followed him right around the classroom twice.
Oh, dear.
Sure, the guy was God above, sure, it's a miracle the man had mental health problems afterwards.
Well, maybe
that is
it does. I mean, how could that not scar somebody? How could that not scar a kid?
Well, she hit him. Well, let's say no.
Was that on the hand? By the way, was that in a Catholic school?
That was in a Catholic school, absolutely.
Whatever happened to the teachings of Jesus?
Absolutely.
Whatever happened to the turning of the other cheek? Whatever happened to loving thy neighbour as thyself? I mean, it's unbelievable that people in Christian schools and people who would call themselves Christian follow Jesus, except where it comes to battering hell out of kids.
Absolutely, and also, George, the humility. No, let's pretend like God forbid, let's pretend the nightmare happens. It's reintroduced. Can you imagine the humiliation that teachers would have to face in having to administer it?
Yes.
They've not administered it, thank God, for 20 years. But then they suddenly, because of this diktat from the health the education department, they're now allowed to introduce it. Will they be campaigning with each other? Sorry, will they be competing? Will there be schools competing with you and say, "Oh, we dole out the best corporal punishment"?
They'll put that in their prospectus. Come to us. We whack better than the others. Fantastic, Dermot. Thanks a lot. George and Farnborough's up, but after this. Yes, it's the week. And it's George Galloway. And I have an ocean of texts and emails. It's absolutely amazing. I'm sorry I haven't been able to get through more of them. George, good evening. More awareness within the schools at an early age regarding misuse of drink and drugs. I was caned in the 60s across the hand, and it did blooming hurt. At a private school in Dulwich. Oh, well, they liked a bit of corporal punishment in the private schools, especially, Marilyn. Keith in Burton-on-Trent says, George, whenever I go abroad on holiday, I'm often embarrassed to be British, as it's always the Brits who are so drunk and unruly. To cap it all, they think it's funny as they stagger about until they collapse. It's certainly a British disease. It reminds me of a saying my dear old gran used to say. First the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, then the drink takes the man. Well said, Keith in Burton-on-Trent. Callum in Glasgow says, George, you really have lost the plot re-punishing children. The 50s had a fraction of the violent and delinquent behaviour by children compared to today. So clearly something's gone wrong. Regarding the alcohol issue, sorry, this is just another case of the ridiculous nanny state this country has become. Callum in Glasgow. Jack in St. John's Wood. George, great show. I have one glass of wine a night after work for the last 35 years. Well, I suppose it's not done you much harm, Jack. Richard in Silby says, I feel that there needs to be a lot stronger punishment for kids that misbehave in schools. Corporal punishment's totally wrong, and we're more civilized to have to use violence to try and teach right and wrong. And Richard from Dale Farm in Basildon says, please be our gatekeeper. Well, Richard, I did my best to defend the people of Dale Farm last week. It's getting quite a big view on YouTube. Thanks very much, and I wish you all the best. John in East Kilbride says, George, I agree with the panel, but Mallrats run a pretty close second. Can you play an original? Damned tonight. Comedy film. Yeah, we are looking at comedy films. I'm coming to that. Now, welcome, George. All Western colonial powers have used alcohol to subject and control and humiliate their conquest. Just look at the Australian Aboriginal people and the Irish through Arthur Guinness, says Dom in Belfast. Dom, come along on Sunday morning. I'll see you in the Rock. And Neil in Wigan says, why pay alcoholics incapacity benefit? That gives them more money just to waste on booze. George, no more booze. You sound like your friends in Iran. Why not move there? You'd be happy. Long live George Bush. Funniest film ever. It's a mad, 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 mad world, says an anonymous texter. Of course he has to be anonymous because he's in Ward 5 in Broadmoor. We have had to endure the garbage from the left since the 60s, and it's not working. It's about time that the useless politicians woke up to the fact they're supposed to protect the majority, not the minority. From Kevin. George, I'm 16 years old and I would not take a caning. I would fight back. It's just not right, says a texter. Me too. Mr. Galloway, I'm a first-timer currently reading your book, Open Season. Reminds me of the time I went back to Kilrea with my grandfather. I stood with him in the town square and he pointed out his name on the mini cenotaph in memory of the fallen. He was a forced conscript, injured in an explosion. The shrapnel hit the crucifix in his pocket and saved him. Hallelujah. He never went home, so he was considered another fallen pape. One of my proudest moments was to see the wry smile on his old face. Hail, hail. Thanks very much indeed, and the best of luck to the team on Sunday. Steve in Liverpool says Iraq is still unsafe, as well as Afghanistan. Now Gaddafi and Tripoli. It's all because of greed, and we're losing our troops every day. And another Kevin says, what a surprise! Teachers deny bad behaviour and bullying. It never happens at their school. The standard is aimed at the lower standard instead of improving the standard, says Kevin. Mark in South Wales says, no mention of the Welsh miners, George. Yes, I mentioned them. John Kearney in Glasgow. George, please do me a massive favour and say hello to my nephew, Thomas Kearney, whose spirit needs lifting. God bless, sir. I'd be much obliged. Yours in peace. Thanks, John, for that. And to Thomas, keep the faith, my boy, and keep your spirits high. And the last text here for the time being says Iraq is still unsafe as well. No, I've done that one. That is a repeat. It's George Galloway. It's the week. It's Talk Sport. Let's take a call, shall we? George in Farnborough on alcohol. George, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hello. It's been a long time since I spoke to you.
Yes, you're welcome again.
Yeah. Hello to your friends, your colleagues who work with you.
Thank you.
And as well, hello to everybody who's listening.
Thank you.
Now, what it is that one of the first things that made me call was this, that you had mentioned about this problem of alcohol. Now, alcohol is not the only problem. When you look at the society as a whole, you look at how people are behaving, you will find that, in fact, I have found out that the reason why there are all these wrong things taking place again, on and again and again, is because the way society is structured is such that it is there to make use of people, not to make people make use of society. It's the other way around. People are supposed to be living to make money.
Yeah, there's a survey out today about consumption. The whole system requires us to endlessly consume and endlessly desire that which we're not yet able to consume. If we try really, really hard, we might just be able to consume.
Yeah. We human beings have been reduced to a level whereby we become tools of money making.
Yeah.
I'll
tell you what, George. George, and it's all BS. It's not midnight yet. I can't tell you what I really think. It means nothing. Look, by the grace of God, I have earned a lot of money, and I have a lot of things. And most of them I never even touch. I never even look at. My life is work and home. Work and playing with my children. I played with my 4-year-old in the back garden today with a ball and a little goal, and it cost me nothing, and it was pure, unadulterated, everlasting, ever memorable joy. Nothing that I could have paid for or bought could possibly have given me that pleasure, that feeling that I got playing with my boy in the garden today. Try it. Here's Graham in Glasgow on the corporal punishment issue. Graham, have you got those famous last words that never done me any harm?
No, I probably don't have, George.
All right, go on. Go on.
I used to get the belt myself on a regular basis, and we had a competition at school. Me and my four friends.
Yeah.
And it was all down to see who could get the most of the belt at the end of the week.
Yeah, that's what it was with me and my pals at in the first year at secondary school, definitely, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I still think there's a big lack of discipline in school. I'm actually coaching football now.
At schools?
Just youth football.
Yeah.
And the discipline seems to have, because there is no discipline at school.
No, it's just not true, Graham. That's just a myth. You're reading the wrong newspapers.
Okay.
The teachers are telling you.
Okay.
The teachers are telling you it's a myth. Most kids are good, Graham.
No, I agree that 80% or whatever the society are good people, as in parents or whatever. You know, and you'll always get the bad apples and all the rest of it. But I genuinely feel as though there's something just went amiss, and a wee bit of the belt sometimes I don't think was bad. But I take on board 100% what you're saying. I would not like to see my child, and this is the point.
I wouldn't tolerate it, Graham. I'd be up to the school warming the ear of the teacher that did it if it was a man. I mean, I would not allow any adult to inflict violence on my children. Never.
Exactly. Do you know the worst thing, George, that I've experienced in my life? It was not physical punishment. It was by two guidance teachers. And it wasn't by two guys. It was one guidance teacher and one standing behind the other. And the actual verbal abuse of the other was quite overwhelming. And if I tell you what it is, you possibly or hopefully understand. It was my mother and father get divorced when I was a youngster, and one of the guidance teacher, I played truant a few times, and the guidance teacher said, "Do you know something, Graham? No wonder why your mother left you, son."
Oh dear. Oh dear. Such a person shouldn't be licensed to teach. Graham, thanks for the call, son. 08717 223344. That's the number to call to join in this great debate with me, George Galloway, on the week on TalkSport. Considering her fame, the voice of former First Lady Jackie Kennedy was seldom heard. But now, interviews recorded just months after her husband Jack's assassination in Dallas in 1963 have been released for the first time. In them, Jackie becomes the first in a long line of women celebs to complain of the pressures of public life.
Then when we got in the White House, all the things that I'd always done suddenly became wonderful. Because anything the First Lady does that's different, everyone sees on. And I was so happy for Jack, especially now that it was only 3 years together, that he could be proud of me then.
Amazing. And, my goodness, ABC, which got that recording, broke all records, I think, all viewing records in the week. I look forward to catching up with it in print, at least, at some stage. Now, I need nominations for the Song of the Week, song that sums up the week, or is apt for one reason or another. Molly sends me 3 kisses and says, "George, it's blues man B.B. King's 86th birthday today. Can you play a song for him? He's still performing." Well, that's a very good suggestion, Molly, and we've got Ugo on the turntable, so he'll make the final decision. I was listening to Otis Redding this week. I tweeted about it with enormous effect. Otis Redding. His voice rings out over the ages. Sunshine on a cloudy day, no doubt. 08717 223344. That's the number to call. You can text on 81089, as many of you have, on this debate about the best comedy. I mean, I expressed the view. Call me old-fashioned. that the idea that this is Spinal Tap being the funniest picture of all time is just ridiculous. Airplane, which comes second, is a much, much better film, as is the Dr. Strangelove, Annie Hall, Life of Brian. They're all much better films than Spinal Tap. At least that's my point of view. And a lot of people have weighed in on this. The greatest comedy film of all time, that's the easiest question you've ever put out, George. Life of Brian, end of debate. Hail, hail, says Spencer, the boy from Coventry. And John in Chiswick says, George, funniest film ever. Surely the unsurpassable Cold War black comedy, Dr. Strangelove. Just magnificent. Blues Brothers, comedy genius, cast all legends, says Davy in Cannock. That's very smart suggestion. I'd forgotten about the Blues Brothers. Great, great, great movie. Kevin in Oma says the best comedy this week was that two-faced clown Miliband lecturing the TUC. Up the champagne socialist communists. Red Ed, he ain't. Adrian from Cleethorpes says, George, great show as always, without question. The greatest comedy film is Life of Brian. Always look on the bright side of life. The best comedy is Prime Minister's Questions. Ha ha, from Ross. And Derek says, I've always loved The Odd Couple and Some Like It Hot. Great show, George. Actually, Some Like It Hot's another great comedy. And Steve in Bradford says, Naked Gun, the first one, is the funniest movie I've ever seen. Yes, indeed, and it has stood the test of time. Here's Jerry in Stoke on corporal punishment. Jerry, welcome.
Song for the day, week.
Yeah, go on.
The theme from Rawhide.
Rawhide? Very good. Rollin', rollin', rollin'. Keep them doggies rollin'. Yes, go ahead, Jerry.
Can't understand what people are going on about. They're mad. Beating up kids.
Well,
Bringing your mum to detention.
You should see the paper that I've got in front of me. A mountain of it.
Go to the 5 techniques. White noise.
Well, go ahead, son. Tell me what you think.
I think it's disgusting. We're basically telling people beat up kids. It's assault.
It is assault.
If the police touch you.
Yeah, it is assault, but there's a lot of people hark back to the days of assault. Jerry, thanks for the call. Can't keep you on because there's a lot of people waiting. Mandy in Worthing wants to talk.
George.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you. I'm really enjoying this show, and there's actually so many subjects that I want to talk about. It's ridiculous because I had a ruler across my hand when I was 11 years old at a secondary school, and it did scar me for life. That man frightened me forevermore, so that I'll get that out of the way. I'm totally,
big brave man, yeah? A big brave man hitting an 11-year-old girl with a piece of wood.
Exactly. I was terrified, absolutely terrified, and I know, I remember his name, I remember what subject it was I was taught, and I'm 53 now, so, that goes to show. Now, I actually rung up about alcoholism, George.
Yeah.
I agree with absolutely everything that you say. I would ban it now. That's only because of my own personal experience. I'm 7 years sober now. But it completely ruined my life, completely and utterly destroyed a beautiful family, beautiful children, a beautiful husband, my first love. Everything went. And I was in such a dreadful state of denial. I hadn't been in hospital since the day I was born, until the drink took hold. And then I was a regular staple there with my suicide attempts and God knows what. And, I look back on those years with terrible shame. But I do want to also say, when people make comments about benefits, I did have to go on incapacity benefit. I actually worked for UBS for 21 years of my life. And before I hit my rock bottom, and alcohol abuse took over. So I was worked like a dog. I worked like a dog, and I loved it. But it had an enormous cost on my health. And when I heard you talk about playing with your little boy in the back garden, it took years of hell for me to realize that the simple things in life that come so free are all we need. And the 53 years I've been on this planet, the 7 years that I've been sober, are the most wonderful years of my life. I've got my family back in my life despite everything. I think it's a wicked, evil drug that tells you that you haven't got it. It took me 6 months to fill in my incapacity benefit form, George, because I was so ashamed that I had sunk so low. I'd never had to be on benefits. I couldn't fill it in. God only knows what would have happened to me if the state hadn't have picked me up and got me well. And I'm eternally grateful to that. So, George, keep up the good work. Thank you.
Mandy, I've been doing this job for 6 years, 5 years, and I don't think I've ever had a more powerful telephone call than that. And I'm not going to prolong it. I'm not going to ask you any questions, though I'm interested in many aspects of what you've just told us. But I think it was poignant. It was heartbreaking. I was praying to myself silently that you would tell us that there had been a happy ending, that you had reunited with your family and so on, and hallelujah, you did. But I don't want to drag it out. I want to leave what you just said up there in the air. It is a disgusting drug. That's what alcohol is. It's a drug that is purveyed to people, knowing that it will hook a given number of them to keep coming back to it every day, and it will hook a smaller number who will simply be unable to live without it, and a still smaller number, but significant number, of people whose lives will be ruined by it until they find the path to salvation, until they find the means within themselves or from amongst the community, the society around them, to get out of that pit. And Carl in Plasto, who will be up after the news, is a fine example of a person who reached rock bottom, Mandy, like you, but like you, managed to climb out of that pit and make a good life for themselves. And I hope that God blesses you and your family, Mandy. This is George Galloway. This is The Week. This is TalkSport.
On DAB Digital Radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport.
You're listening to The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport. 08717 223344. That's the number to call. Text me on 81089 your song choice that sums up the week, or your funniest movie. I want to hear from you. That's 81089 at 50 pence plus normal sending charges, or you can write free of charge through the website at talksport.co.uk. We're talking about the evils of cheap drink. We're talking about the collapsing economy in the European Union, and in particular in the Eurozone, where by the end of the year it's said that growth will be zero, which is only really a kick in the backside of another recession, though many people don't feel they ever came out of the last one. We're talking about the health service, embarrassing bodies and freaky eaters, and Dr. Pixie McKenna. And we'll be talking to David Brady, I think, about the rugby in the course of the next 56 minutes or so. But I repeat myself, women callers, first-time callers, callers who disagree with me, prioritised. All calls welcome. The legendary Carl in Plasto. He's up next after this.
The Week with George Galloway on TalkSport.
I always like it when I can showcase the splendid master race of your so-called loyalist. Here we go again, George Galloway attacking all that is good with my country, capital letters. Alcohol. My country was built on good working class people who enjoy a drink. Winston Churchill, for instance, yet you would ban it if you had your way. Thank God you can never be my Prime Minister. We are the people, not you, Mr. Galloway. We are. No surrender! ! Ross Winsborough, Wishaw loyal. You'll remember Ross. He's the one that the gypsies were stealing his string vest off the washing line last week. Do you remember him? Do you remember him with his backside falling out of his trousers? Not with two halfpennies to rub together, but standing up and saluting loyally the system that's left him in Wishaw with not very much to show for it. Here's Samuel in Weston-super-Mare. Go on yourself, Sam. Go on, Sam. Samuel? Samuel?
Beg your pardon?
Samuel, this is George Galloway. You're on the air. Samuel, you don't need to do the heavy breathing. You've been waiting on the line, and you're now on the air. Samuel? Samuel? What a pity. Let's go to the legend. It's Carl in Plasto. Go ahead, Carl.
That message you got there before for Wishaw.
Wishaw loyal.
It reminds me of, it ties in with Cameron and Sarkozy, because it reminded me of myself when I was age 9, marching around Penalty with my wee pals, chanting, "We won the war, we won the war," you know. I think the Americans had just killed 100,000 people, you know. And I was celebrating as age 9, and in between getting the belt at school. I left school at 14 without even a leaving certificate, you know. That was how well I did at school. But I never got hit at home at all, you know. And anyway, the sadism anyway.
It is. A lot of these people who were giving out the corporal punishment were sadists.
Of course they were. Yeah, if they weren't when they started, they were when they finished, you know. The power is corrupt, as
yes.
Lord Acton said. Frank Sinatra drinking again. Or Andy Fairweather Low, Wide-Eyed and Legless.
That was a good one. Wide-Eyed and Legless, and Gin House was another that they did. Do you remember?
Blues, Dinah Washington there. But the Scottish, the capacity, first of all, the capacity for human beings to see that the selling of alcohol is no more virtuous or respectable than the selling of heroin and cocaine is astonishing, really.
Yes.
You know? I mean, we've got bars in the House of Commons, you know. It's an addiction.
19 bars in the Houses of Parliament.
It's a medical as well as a cultural problem, of course, you know. But the insanity, the tightening up the laws on tobacco and cannabis, whilst relaxing the laws concerning the sale of alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredible, this blindness.
When alcohol's more damaging than the other two.
Of course, there's so many, the Guinnesses and all the rest of them, you know. But isn't it highlighting that the fact that the Scottish devolution is having an unexpected side effect? Because just as government policy is different with respect to the alcohol pricing issue, you know, it's also with tuition fees, care for the elderly. They kept the subsidies for the 16 and 17-year-olds, and they had better unemployment figures than England. And there's no riots in Scotland either, you know, so it shows that government policy has economic and social effects, and that is, they don't have Tories running their country.
Hardly got any Tories at all.
The
Tories in Scotland are considering changing their name, breaking away from the Conservative Party, and I don't know what they'd call themselves.
Well, they called themselves the Progressives, crazily enough, when I was a young boy.
Yes.
The Tories are not so much an endangered species in Scotland now as a notifiable disease.
Yeah.
The last week now on alcoholism, I've got a poem I'd like to recite.
Yes, go on. I'm sorry about last week. Go on, Carl.
It's called The Park.
Yeah.
I lurched into this bar bang on 11, a maelstrom of despair and naked nerves. From hell I hope to quickly float to heaven, depending on the whims of he who serves. The barman said I must drink quite a bit to have such frantic early morning shakes. Well, frankly, yes, I do spill most of it, until I've had enough of what it takes. Conversing with this chap behind the bar, soon overfull of jovial jubilation, through throwing tots of rum back like a tar, I showed some signs of blind intoxication. The barman, who it seemed was an Italian, then told me that he thought I'd had enough and spotting his St. Christopher medallion, I threw a kind of Celtic kind of huff. I said, now look here, mate, you're not the Pope, and I have no damned divine infallibility. He told me that I was a drunken dope, and furthermore was lacking in virility. Ignoring things like race relations acts, I told him what I thought of lousy Latins, and then producing some religious tracts, the bastard said he'd pray for me at Matins. I said to him, to me it is quite clear, you're living proof of Darwin's missing link. And anyway, how long have you been here to think you'll tell a Scotsman how to drink? I have been on the job 6 months so far, the guy replied with eye-tie indignation. I said, it is quite clear then that you are not prone to premature ejaculation. He huffed and puffed and purpled at this point, which just intensified my boozer's buzz, until with Roman nose quite out of joint, the sod he grabbed the phone and called the fuzz. I clambered from my stool onto the floor, and making one last unrecalled remark, I reeled across the bar and out the door, and did my future drinking in the park.
Amazing. Carl in Plaster, what a man. Now, from one legend to another, here's Fred the cabbie, the wisest cabbie in Christendom. He's in central London, no doubt in his cab. Fred, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, not so bad, mate. How are you?
Great, nice to hear from you again.
Yeah, I've just got back from sunny Spain, and it's funny you're talking about booze. First of all, George, can I just say my heart goes out to the families of those miners in Wales.
Oh, dear.
You know, because absolutely tragic.
2011.
You know.
Four guys in a drift mine.
Yep.
Crawling around on their hands and knees.
Absolutely. Working class heroes.
2 or 3 feet wide that seam was.
Yeah.
That pathway was.
But there again, it's, you know, Thatcher was right, of course. The reason she shut the mines, we all know, is because they were dangerous. And a little bit of irony
That's
there.
why they're dangerous, of course, because they've been flooded. And then when they get reopened again, they're even more dangerous than they were before.
Yeah. Anyway, my heart goes out to them. Can we put some Peter Sellers stuff in?
Yes, go on, yes.
I like the Pink Panthers, obviously, but some of the old Ealing
Being There, I loved Being There. I thought that was a masterful.
Yeah.
That was his very last film, Sellers.
Yeah. You know? And, of course, in his very early days, he had the Ealing comedies, you know, I'm All Right, Jack, and stuff like that. They were classics.
Yes.
But Life of Brian's up there. It's got to be a contender, that's for sure. But
I watched Airplane again for about the 5th time, and it still made me laugh.
Yeah, it's so stupid, isn't it? Yeah.
Don't call me Shirley.
Yeah, we talk about the cane, George. I got the cane at school several times. They say it doesn't do you any harm. Well, I'll tell you what, it didn't do me any bloody good either. But we had a lot of thugs. We had a lot of bullies. We used to call them teachers.
Thugs, bullies, perverts.
Yeah, and you know,
that's the only teachers that want to be whacking children.
Do you know what I once got the cane for?
Tell me.
I got a skull and crossbones ring, a plastic one, out of a bubble gum machine. And I had it on my finger. And our German master, who was German, I won't mention his name, though he's probably long gone, caned me over it and not even bothered to tell me why. I got 3 on each hand for that. It was only later, of course, because I always associated. I was 13, George. You know, I always associated skull and crossbones with pirates. You know, it's what kids do.
Indeed.
It was much later, of course, that I realised that it was an SS emblem.
Oh, dear.
But why didn't he just sit me down and explain that to me, and I'd have taken it off?
Yeah.
Why give me the cane with any explanation? Because they're sadists, they're bullies. And I ended up leaving school at 15 because I hated the place. I couldn't wait to get away from it.
Scarred. A whole generation, several generations with that kind of thing. Thanks for that, Fred, the legendary, cleverest cabbie in Christendom. Big up to all the cabbies and all those driving for a living tonight. Now let's talk to John Taylor about the Rugby World Cup down under in New Zealand. I've not been following that much of it because I've been busy. I'm writing yet another book. But I did read that they were tossing dwarves around in hostelries. John, is that the whole story? Or has there been more? Has it been as interesting on the field as it apparently has been off it?
It's been much more interesting on the field, actually, George. I think that I certainly wasn't down in Queenstown where all this is supposed to have gone, but it sounds as if it was a local promotion that all went a little bit wrong, and a couple of the tabloids and you'll know that they don't miss an opportunity. Decided to try and cash in and dig some dirt and turn it into a scandal story. I think it's all been put to bed. I don't think Mike Tyndall is daft enough a couple of weeks after marrying into the royal family to suddenly be disappearing from a bar with some female companion. And I think the whole thing has been made everybody has now realised it was a scam.
Nonetheless, tossing dwarves around's not a good look.
No, but you see, I don't think that happened at all. I mean, the thing is, I don't pretend to know very much about it, but that was set up as a thing by the local tourist board, as I understand it. So, I mean, in other words, they're the ones who really got it wrong.
Dwarf,
it sounds so politically incorrect to me that I don't think we'd go near any such thing.
Unbelievable, yeah. You'll have Gaunt and Little John and so on. They'll be on the plane out to New Zealand if that's the kind of holiday you can get.
Exactly.
Tell me now, what's been happening then on the field, John?
Well, we're just coming really into the second round of matches now, and this is where it all gets incredibly tense and serious, because we've got the biggest match of this weekend really is tonight. In each pool you've got seeded teams, and the matches between the seeded teams don't always come up last. They're staggered to keep the interest going through the tournament, and tonight Ireland and Australia are battling it out as the seeded teams in their group, and that will be a huge one, because, I mean, that decides your positioning in the pools going through to the knockout stages, and it's obviously a very big game. And Ireland had a very poor build-up coming into the World Cup, and they need to hit their straps if they're going to beat Australia, who look to be probably behind New Zealand's second favourites.
New Zealand had a huge win today. I mean, are they looking unstoppable, John?
They're not looking unstoppable, no. I mean, one of the problems that Rugby World Cup has is that there is a great disparity between the top sides and the next tier of sides, and New Zealand were up against Japan, and Japan simply can't compete with them physically. So you're going to get a few results like that sort of come through, and you mustn't read too much into that. New Zealand are very good, they are favourites, and they're on home soil, but Australia could beat them, England could beat them, South Africa could beat them, and maybe the French, if we're sort of not sure how the French are going to play, because they played well below par last season, but they're wonderful rugby players, and if they suddenly get it right, they can come out firing on all cylinders, and they could beat anybody in the world.
John Taylor, the voice of rugby for TalkSport Radio. Remember, all the games are live on TalkSport. John, thanks very much indeed for that. Let's go to Patricia in Liverpool on the corporal punishment issue. Patricia, welcome to the show.
Hello, George.
Hi, nice to hear from you again.
I just want to say, before I say about corporal punishment, very disappointing, your friend Carl from Plaistow.
Tell me.
That was a racist, disgusting, so-called, was the poem. How dare he? He was, no, if he had been saying a poem where it was mentioned any other ethnic group, but he was going on about Roman noses, Italians, Pope.
You entirely missed the point of the poem,
I
Patricia.
know the point. No, I do.
The point of the poem was the degradation of Carl, the degradation of the drunk.
I understand about Carl, but did you listen to the words of the poem?
I listened to it carefully. It's the opposite of what you're saying. The poem was intended to show the descent into madness of the drunk.
But why did he have to mention Italians, Roman noses?
Because the barman was an Italian.
I'm sorry.
And the barman was the hero of the poem. He was the hero of the poem. He was praying for the drunk, trying to rescue the drunk.
But in that so-called heroism was racism. I'm sorry. It's really disgusting.
You really are
I'm
quite wrong, Patricia.
My dad was Italian, a beautiful man, and I think that there's a lot of racism in that. I don't know about Carl's background, but
I can assure you the last thing in the world he is a racist. Anyway, you wanted to talk about corporal punishment.
Yes, I did. Corporal punishment. I despair of this government. They are going back to the future. Next thing you know, they'll be talking about workhouses.
Yeah, well,
and hanging and flogging.
They're already talking about workhouses. Effectively, that's what the drive of their whole welfare reform is. The mentality of the workhouse, definitely.
Definitely. I mean, I just to smack and harm and painfully induce anything in a child is just so disgusting to me.
Thanks, Patricia. Here's Chris in Enfield. Go ahead, Chris.
Hello, George.
Hi, mate.
First time here. What I want to actually speak about is the poor miners that lost their lives today.
May God rest them,
Now,
yes.
you get the soldiers that go, they volunteer, and I'm not against soldiers because 76 and 77 I was a poppy organiser and raised money for them through the British Legion, and I will still do it. So it's not that. But these miners go down the mines because they've no choice. It's their only way of unemployment. George, I was in Sogate 82 at the time, and we fed them, taking food up there, and I went to Ashington, Yorkshire and Wales, and I see the police brutality, and I see it at Wapping as well. You know, you was there.
I've got the scars to prove it.
Yeah, and that's right. So have I, and I see the police kick, I won't say the word, out of us. Because we was like 40-odd, they was 25 with crash helmets and bayonets and truncheons, shields and everything.
Yeah.
We see that brutality. And what's annoying me more when I see all this today is that lady is getting, sorry, I've lost the plot here, a state funeral. And
we'll see.
Now,
We'll
please
see about
rise
that.
up and make sure this never happens.
Well, Chris, Dangerous Dogs and Margaret Thatcher's funeral is guaranteed to light up the switchboard, but my producer would be cross because neither is on the agenda tonight. But thanks very much for your call. I could feel the sincerity in it. Thanks a lot, my friend. Here's Keith in Southend. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I just picked up on the show about 3/4 of an hour ago when I was driving home.
Okay.
And you were talking about punishment in schools. So I went to school in from 72 to 78. And in the secondary school that I was at, I was dyslexic and I couldn't read or write. And we had year teachers that dished out the cane. And I got virtually caned every week. And even to the point where there was head of departments that were allowed to dish out the cane. And there was one person who was in charge of the science department that used to hit people with a Bunsen burner. And it made the local press at the time because the way he beat this boy, it was shown in the paper. But still he kept his job. But I believe, because I found alcohol and drugs at an early age, and I used that to block it out when I was at school. I was asked to leave school when I was 15. The headmaster used to cane me virtually every week, but he didn't do me any good. And he used to sort of like, it was a saying in the school at the time, and people would know if they was at the school at the same time as me, that he used to put the back cape on to cane you. He used to, the hands over the knuckles. It didn't bother me because I just got used to it. But like I said, I found drinking drugs at an early age, so I used that. And I carried on using that until about 3 years ago, until I got into recovery because I was I'm an alcoholic. But I believe that scarred me from an early age, and I carried quite a lot of them resentments against them people.
I bet you did, Keith in Southend. Thanks very much for that powerful call. George, my late father wrote with his right hand, even though he was left-handed. This thanks to those wonderful Christian brothers who beat him on a daily basis for writing with the devil's hand, says Dave in Kent. Bert of Stanford says, George, as a pensioner, my only last pleasure is a whiskey at night and a wine with Sunday dinner. Will not be possible if price rises. By the way, I'm housebound and I love your show on Fridays. But that's not right. This alcohol pricing is a way of guiding people, edging people away from the most powerful alcohol, the strongest of the beers, the strongest of the ciders, the strongest of the wines, to less alcoholic and less powerful, less percentage proof alcohol. That's got to be a good idea, surely. Sarah, a female in Cardiff, says, I felt the need to make contact as I'm listening and can't believe the women's views I'm hearing on corporal punishment. Please encourage the women with the view that this form of punishment is correct to read some decent research and not to just believe trash in rags. Young people and children are decent. Some adults appear to be the ones who require further education about how to treat others. They could learn a lot from children. Sarah, a perfect summary of the case. Well, Frank in Edinburgh, he's up next, but after this. Here's Frank in Edinburgh on kids. Are they violent, Frank? Why are they violent?
George, I don't believe in corporal punishment, but your argument doesn't hold up much water. You're saying violence breeds violence, but the belt's been banned for, 20 years, and parents are not allowed to lift their hands to their kids, and yet there's more violence on the streets than there ever been.
That's not true.
Well, it is true.
No, I mean, what age are you, Frank?
68.
You're 68. You're trying to tell me that the Glasgow gangs, No Means City, the Razor gangs, was a less violent time than now? You're having a laugh. You're old enough to know better.
There's more violence in Edinburgh than I've ever seen.
You just think that because you're getting
wild
old.
Here.
You just
There's
think
kids
that
running wild.
You just think that because you're getting old, Frank. Believe me.
No, I
and
don't think it.
You're reading the Sunday Post.
Nah, this is you, George, using your old cliche and just shutting people up when they want to talk.
Shutting you up? You never stop talking. Go on.
You're stopping me talking. I'm telling you, there's more violence in the street. You've not been to Edinburgh for a while, obviously.
No.
You've not walked the streets of Edinburgh at night time, so you wouldn't know what you're talking about. And you've probably not walked the streets of Glasgow at night time because you wouldn't feel safe. So you're talking rubbish.
Well, you tell me this. It has. I am 57 years old.
Yes, I know your age.
And when I was on the streets
on
Fridays and Saturday nights in the 1960s and the 1970s, there was plenty of violence, believe me. And I don't believe that there was less violence in the 60s and the 70s than there is now. And people were allowed to be caned and belted and slippered and rulered and whacked and belted. And
but you're saying the opposite of what you're saying. You're saying the opposite. You're saying you shouldn't be allowed to hit children because it breeds violence. Well, where's the violence come from the last 20 years? You're not being allowed to belt them. So where's the violence come from?
But there was plenty of violence when you were allowed to belt them, is my point. So what's the correlation?
You changed your tune.
No, I'm not, Frank. You just need to clean your ears a wee bit. Here's John in Wigan, in Greater Manchester. Go on yourself, John.
Hello, George.
Hi, sir.
I'm a first-time caller.
Welcome.
Please bear with me.
Of course.
There's one or two items I'd like to comment on. And first and foremost is my condolences go out to the miners in Wales.
Yeah.
Me being an ex-miner from a young man. My heart goes out to the families and to the community.
Unbelievable tragedy.
Unbelievable. But the first item I'd like to talk about is corporal punishment, as it's quoted as. Now, I'm 67 years old.
Mm-hmm.
At school, at 11 years old, I left school when I was 14. Beg your pardon, I left school when I was 14. And I can remember when I was 11, when I joined secondary modern. I've always been very active in my life, very fit, young man. And we used to do cross-country running. And we used to get a bit bored with it, one or two friends of mine, and we'd take a shortcut so we could swim in the local reservoir, and then pick up the runners on the way back, and we'd invariably come in the first 10 or a dozen. And this particular time we got found out and sent to the headmaster's office at school. And on the wall before you went in, there was a cabinet with a cane in. Like these fishermen have for. I'll never forget this as long as I live. And in it was a cane. And when you stood there waiting to go in to see the headmaster, whose name was Mr. Bell,
You had to look at that.
we looked at that first, and we went inside, and then it was whack, 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 6 of the best. And that's always made a big impression on my life.
I bet it did. Bet it left a big impression on your backside, too. Thanks, John. Here's Carol in Bow. Carol, welcome back to the show.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Few points. Number one, I just think Stir Crazy has got to be the funniest film of all time.
Who was in that, Stir Crazy?
Oh, God, the one with the googly eyes.
Richard Pryor, yes.
That's
Great
it,
movie.
yeah,
Great
that
movie.
Was just so funny.
Yeah, marvellous.
I've also got a song. I think Benny King, Stand By Me, way Cameron's out there standing by the Libyans. I just think that's
Stand
quite
By Me
apt.
would be a nice one,
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what catches Hugo's mind.
Yeah. I'll go on to the booze and drinking habits in a minute. But corporal punishment, oh my God, if any teacher laid a hand on any of my children or my grandchildren, well, I'm sorry, I would just have to go and punch them out. I'm really, really sorry.
I mean, what's all this support for it? And you notice it's the very
times.
old.
It is the
The
times,
older
isn't
people
it?
get, the worse they think that life is for the young. I mean, this guy in Edinburgh, who, by the way, Edinburgh's not a violent city, not then nor now, who imagines, because he's 67 or 69 or whatever he was, that Edinburgh is now running wild with children as opposed to what it was when he was a teenager. You pick up all this stuff from the right-wing media and so on, and you become, the kind of reactionary that we've just been hearing.
But would the teacher beating a child in a school?
I don't think
make
the
any
teachers
difference?
wouldn't do
If it's
it.
going to be feral, it's going to be feral. Maybe a lot of kids that are like that are because they don't get enough attention. Just
They probably
kicked around the ear.
they probably get battered at home.
Yeah, more or less.
I mean, it just seems to be obvious that if a child grows up thinking that violence is normal because it's normally being visited on them, how could they not end up being violent themselves?
But how are they going to dish this violence out? Are they going to get permission? Or are they just going... I remember when I used to get the cane, we used to just go into this old purse in the headmaster's office. He used to give us a couple of claps on the hand or on our bum and just, with no reason, never asked our parents. I was scared to tell me mum and dad. But, just weirdos.
Well, and he probably went home and thought about it at night, if you get my drift. Thanks, Carl. Here's the legendary Tommy in Glasgow. Gone yourself, Tom. Tommy. My goodness. He must have got a fare. Here's Fraser in Bolton. Always talks sense. Go ahead, Fraser.
I wouldn't go that far, George. Actually, just a very humorous way of saying, I remember when I was in school in the 80s and they were stopping the belt, there was a typo in the letter that came over, and I'm not making this up. It said the school will be stopping capital punishment. Actually, wasn't that
Seems
far
to be a
off.
mistake. Seems to be a mistake that plenty have made tonight.
Yeah, just a bit. Actually, getting the laughter away, you touched a wee bit of a raw nerve for the drink tonight. My big beef is about football in particular with the sponsorship. Shirt sponsorship from tenants and various people, sponsorship of the leagues, the drink companies.
Such a paradox, isn't it? You couldn't play football or do anything the more you drank the product that's plastered over the chests of the players.
I've seen the end result of it, and in a sporting context, privately, I wrote a book about a footballer in Scotland, Bill Abercrombie, and when after he finished playing, his life went down the tubes a bit. This is what booze does for you. He had nothing left. He'd sold even his socks of his cup final appearance for a drink. Yeah. He was living in a hovel in a flat.
He was a great player too.
Played against Dalgleish Best. He was drinking 3 bottles of QC sherry a day. He was 8 stone, liver failure, the ZZ Top beard, no teeth. And when he was having seizures, and he was so scared of the seizures that he kept drinking. Now, boys and girls, this is what chronic alcoholism does for you. That's cool.
Powerful, Fraser, as I knew it would be. Thanks for that, my friend. Sean in Manchester's up next, but after this. The funniest film ever has to be Inverness versus Celtic last season. Every time I watch it, I just fall about laughing. The look on Neil Lennon's face when he realises the title is going to Ibrox is priceless. The Hail Hail Brigade have no chance on Sunday. Follow, follow, says Pete from Edinburgh. Very good, Pete. Very funny. But I think you're wrong about Sunday, by the way. I wonder what the bookies are thinking about that. What's the prices for Sunday? See if you can get me that, Laurie. George, by far the funniest movie ever has to be Step Brothers with Will Ferrell. That's from Joe in Cumbria. And bring back the cane. Kids today have no respect, he says. Which is the point of Sean in Manchester. Let's hear why. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for taking my call. The major concern I have with the youth of today is, are we going to lose a generation within the next 10 years of decent workers and basically law-abiding citizens? Obviously, we've had the riots and we've seen what's happened of the riots, and to be fair, I think the riots have been a bit of a kick up the backside for society within the UK. But the thing that I worry about is, I'm 41 years old. I was always brought up to say thank you and please. I was always brought up by my parents to respect the law, and even to this day, I'm still. If I see a pair of blue flashing lights behind me, I'm nervous and think, crikey, what on earth have I done? And I think the youth have kind of lost that. And
why do you think that, Sean?
It's a difficult one to play.
How closely are you involved with youth?
Very much. I mean, I've got 4 beautiful children, three gorgeous daughters, and
are they bad? Are they bad kids?
No, I mean, from my point of view, my wife and myself, we've always brought them up to have manners. Even when we go to places like the fairground, we always.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sean. Let's count it up. You've got 4 lovely children, by the grace of God. And they're not bad. My children are not bad. Amanda had 5, and they weren't bad. Somebody else had kids earlier on. Can't remember whether it was 3 or 4, and they weren't bad. You see, none of our kids are bad. There's the same percentage of bad apples in the cohort of youth today as there ever was. This is a myth that our children today are bad. They're not. The vast majority of our children are good. They're not rioting. They're not afraid of blue flashing lights. It's a myth, Sean. John in Burntwood in West Midlands. Let's hear from him. John, go on yourself.
Hello,
Go on, mate.
When I was at school, this is just the most stupid thing, but really hurt us. We had a friend called Phil who was whacked over his hands with a metal ruler.
A metal ruler?
You don't
My goodness, it's getting worse here.
I was a bit of a creep. Okay, I was just a nice guy. Keep your mouth shut. Imagine a PE teacher or a woodworker going, that's okay, that's not okay. That ever happens to any of my kids, they'll be so quickly in court, don't you think? But my reflection on that is that was supposed to be appropriate behaviour. We're talking about 1979. Well, it wasn't appropriate then. Even the kids thought, oh my God, you know.
Didn't follow that much. Did you get my drift? Rodney in Devon, he's up next. Go on yourself, Rodney.
Thank you, George. George, amusing anecdote. Amongst other jobs, I was a primary school teacher for 15 years. And one afternoon I came out of the classroom and there was a group of mums there, and one of them said to me, Mr. Barsha, she was from Italy. She said, Mr. Barsha, you're taking my Mario? I said, yes. She said, my son Mario, you pick him up by his ear, you twist his ear around very hard, you lift him up, you swing him round and round by his ear. I said, well, 2 things, madam. First of all, your Mario is not even in my class. And the second thing is I never did any such thing. She said, no, I know you didn't, but I want you to. I want you to.
Very funny, Rodney. Very funny, son.
Cheers, George.
All the best, pal. Great call. Here's Clive in Worcester. Go ahead, Clive.
George.
Hi.
I listened to more or less the same sort of subject today on Radio 2 with Jeremy Vine, yeah?
Oh, did you?
I did, yeah. More or less the same sort of subject.
Okay.
Right, what was it? I'm 44 years of age.
Yeah.
Right, what was it? It didn't do anybody any harm whatsoever, George. What was it? It just makes you a man. It just
makes you a man.
Right.
What happens if you're a little? What if you're a little girl? What does that make you? Does that make you a man?
George, what was it? Nobody give you the cane, right? If you didn't.
Clive, we're talking about 9-year-old girls being caned. Several of them have been on the line tonight. You said it makes you a man. What does it make a 9-year-old girl?
It's so, George.
What does it make?
Girl.
What does it make a 9-year-old girl
George,
being hit by a teacher with a ruler over the wrist?
George, you're not hearing me. You're not hearing me.
Tell you what. Let me announce a ban, and I really mean that. Don't phone me if you're drunk, okay? I hate drunk people, and I don't want drunk people calling me. I mean that. If you're drunk, don't phone me. Here's Aaron in Glasgow. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hello, George.
Hi, sir.
I'm the same with drunk people. I'm a mobile DJ. I'm just finished a gig and I'm just away for a lot of them there.
I bet you see it all.
Oh, I do. I'm phoning. I can't believe we're back in this subject. To be honest, I'm 25, so I'm only about 7 years finished school, and I was quite a kind of gabby person at school. I would speak a lot. I was constantly getting pulled up by teachers. But academically, I was sound. I was good at my work. But I just needed a constant reminder. And stop talking. Go on with your work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I was to get caned, I mean, I went on to do hires and went to university. Things didn't work out at university because I liked to party and things like that. But
well, you're in show business. You're now in show business, Alan.
Exactly. Well, that's it. But I think that would have put me off school. I don't think you should fear your teachers. And when you start confusing that, you know.
What you have to do if you're a teacher, as if you're a parent, you have to have the children's respect. I never, my oldest child, I never would have dreamt of striking her. But all I had to do was raise my voice to her, or even raise my eyebrow to her, and she'd have fallen into line. I'm very lucky in that respect, maybe. But the idea that by terrifying children and striking them with implements, metal or wood, the idea that would... Oh, dear. Now, a stranger's just wandered into the room that I thought he'd gone on to great things in show business.
Only for a few weeks.
How did you do?
Oh, it was wonderful, George. I mean, I'm
Very
sure you know Edinburgh very well yourself.
Yes.
Magnificent atmosphere during the festival.
Wonderful, yeah.
And this is, there were a few other political comics up there as well. It was very enjoyable, professionally and socially.
Excellent.
But it's good to be back.
You're looking healthy and happy, and I'm very glad to see you.
Oh, thank you, George.
What have you got tonight?
We're continuing the discussion about discipline and whether it should take a physical form. I mean, at heart, I agree with you, George, but I just wonder, in terms of the role of the state, where parents are failing their children and they are raising kids, admittedly in the minority, but that are destructive, that are violent, particularly once you're getting to an age of about 16. I wonder what role the state has in bringing discipline, and when raising an eyebrow and when raising a voice isn't enough. I mean, should we have
detention, there's detention, there's lines, there's withdrawal of privileges, there's ostracism, there's expulsion, exclusion.
I mean, I went to schools where I remember a child threw a chair at a teacher once. She would have fights on the field. I saw kids hit teachers. A parent came in and slapped a teacher at the primary school I went to in front of the class. I mean, there were some very difficult, as I'm sure you're aware, very difficult areas in this country where discipline is not given at home in any form, whether it's physical or implied or indeed verbal. And at what point does the state have a responsibility to intervene, and who should it be? I mean, I don't really want police officers at schools or bouncers. As many schools, well, not many, some schools have sort of security staff. I mean, at what point should we never become physical, or...
I just don't think... I mean, I can understand the urge to be violent. I frequently feel it. but it doesn't solve anything. That's my point. And it will only make bad children more bad, believe me. There's no child who's behaving badly who's going to start behaving well because somebody's knocking lumps out of them.
No, but at the moment...
It's just illogical.
At the moment, the teachers do try diplomacy, do try raising their voice, do try detention, all the tools currently available to them, And a lot of the time it doesn't work with particularly disruptive pupils.
Well, that's true.
So either we exclude them, we send them all off to schools where you bunch disruptive children together, which again is very tempting. It's not something I would like to see, really. I just wonder whose job is it then to enforce some discipline? Because the police are allowed to whack you if you're behaving in an unruly manner, and by the time you're 16, you're an adult in the eyes of many people. Why should that not apply on school grounds?
Well, it's going to rage all night. This is going to rage all night. But the voice of the thinking man and woman, at least, is back on the overnight. Thanks, Matt. It's been marvellous. And this is B.B. King, mainly because it's his birthday today. He's 86 and still going strong. It's been marvellous for me.
I don't think I could just talk enough.
I hope it was for you. If it is, stay tuned to TalkSport.